Hello, good morning. Welcome back to another virtual visit live from the Alaska SeaLife Center. Again, my name's Alex. I'm joined today with Taylor.
Hi.
And we are out on the floor. If you see people wandering around, we are open. We're carefully watching our internet connection now, so if we got some little connection issues down the line, we will work to get those sorted. But it's kind of getting busier here at the center. You know, summer is coming. And we're going to show you what the weather's like here in nice spring here in Seward, Alaska in just a moment. But of course, before we get started with the program, we do want to thank our sponsors. So Royal Caribbean Group has sponsored this season of virtual visits here at the Alaska SeaLife Center. And we are able to bring them to you live. So thank you, Royal Caribbean Group. All right, so I did promise we were going to show you our nice weather here. So that's always our sunrise here in Seward. Now today our little time-lapse camera had a bit of an issue, so we only got a couple frames, but I got to tell you, this is what the entire morning has looked like here actually. We do have kind of a weather front coming in off the Gulf of Alaska. Of course, Seward, Resurrection Bay, which is this bay back behind the SeaLife Center, it is up against the northern edge of the Gulf of Alaska. And so any sort of weather that we get out there comes in. And I mean, today it's like snowing. It was raining earlier.
Definitely. Yeah, the flakes this morning were giant. Like walking in from the parking lot this morning, I was getting like pelted with snowflakes.
Yeah, big flakes. The kind that just jump right in your eye usually as you're walking. But yeah, this you're not missing out by not having the full sunrise. I looked out there just before we started the program, and these few clips here are from about 8:30 in the morning. And now, you know, 11 o'clock here, Alaska time, it still looks pretty much just like this.
It does. It really does. Oh, another cool thing. I saw a moose on my way to work this morning.
That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
We've been getting a lot of snow this winter, and the snow does kind of drive the moose down out of the hills a little bit towards the city. And usually if you live kind of like north of town or towards the edges, you might see a moose every winter anyway. But here at the SeaLife Center, kind of unusual. We have had moose take naps underneath like the trees in our parking lot and that sort of thing before. So if you if you happen to visit us kind of in the winter, late winter, early spring, still an adventure, even though the weather might not be the most pleasant weather. But let's get started with our program today. And I mentioned we're out on the floor. We're actually in one of the darker corners of the SeaLife Center. We're in front of one of our only freshwater tanks for the aquarium department. And this has salmon back in it. That's what we're going to be talking about today, our salmon. But not just the salmon in the exhibit here. We actually have a whole hallway. We'll take a look at that a little bit later on. That goes through kind of the stages of the salmon's life cycle. We start in freshwater, we get to kind of brackish water, and then we get out to just seawater. We'll go over that, but Taylor actually had the opportunity to tag along while they went and got the salmon. And I think that's a question we get almost every program we focus on animals is, where did you get them from?
Where did they come from? Yeah, so these salmon actually came from Trail Lakes Hatchery, which I had the opportunity to tag along with and ride about 45 minutes up the road and head to the hatchery. And that was an experience I had never seen before.
It was pretty fun. Yeah, we have great footage of it. You put together a little clip. So let's jump on in that and see, where does the SeaLife Center get its salmon from?
Let's go for it.
My name is Chuck DiMarzio, and I'm an aquarist here at the Alaska SeaLife Center. And today we went up to Trail Lakes Hatchery, just north of Moose Pass, about a 35-mile drive from the Alaska SeaLife Center, to go get a bunch of Coho salmon smolt.
So as you can see, once our aquariums team gets all of the coolers in place, we are now ready to add water. So this water is coming in full force right from the hatchery. We're able to add that water into all 4 of these coolers that we brought up with us from the SeaLife Center.
So salmon are an oxygen-loving fish. They require a lot of oxygen in their water to be healthy. So what we're doing is we're adding oxygen to the water to make sure that these fish have enough oxygen to breathe. So we're doing our best to keep that oxygen level at 100% saturation, which is how we measure the oxygen level in these coolers.
Once the air stones were in place and adding oxygen to the water, we headed inside the hatchery to see where the Coho salmon have been living. And before the salmon make their way into our coolers, they're weighed. They weigh about 2 kilograms. Now, of course, each individual Coho salmon did not weigh 2 kilograms, but they were able to calculate how many salmon were in each kilogram and roughly estimate how many netfuls we needed to take with us.
So these fish are roughly 1 year old at this point. They are what's known as brood year 2020 fish. So the parents of these fish swam upriver and spawned in the summer of 2020. That's where that brood year 2020 comes from. Even though these fish hatched in the winter of 2021, they're of that 2020 brood year.
So after we got the last of the Coho salmon, we asked for a tour. Now, of course, we were very interested in seeing the rest of the hatchery, so we were able to walk back into where we collected the Coho salmon, and we were following her into the incubation room. Next, we headed outside to see the Tutka sockeye salmon. Now, once our tour of the hatchery was complete, we headed back outside to check on our Coho salmon. So we're using a DO meter, also known as a dissolved oxygen meter, and it measures, you guessed it, dissolved oxygen in the water, in addition to oxygen saturation percentage and temperature. Once that was set in place, we were ready to head back to the SeaLife Center, but wanted to make sure that we were checking our O2 as we were heading down the road. So here you can see that you know you work in an aquarium when you're driving down the road and you have an O2 meter sticking out the window. About halfway along our drive from Moose Pass and the hatchery, we decided to pull over and recheck all of the O2 levels in all 4 of the coolers. We just wanted to make sure that all of our Coho salmon were doing great and healthy along the about 30-45 minute drive from Moose Pass. So we opened all of the coolers, made sure there were no issues, made sure that the air stones were working properly, and then we headed back to the SeaLife Center. Once at the SeaLife Center, we did some heavy lifting to get those coolers out of the back end of the pickup truck, set them on this giant cart, and of course, made sure that our salmon were still doing just fine. Now, once they're on this cart, they get to moving, and they're wheeled down our research hallway all the way down to our south curatorial, where they will be placed into salmon holding.
So we're going to be taking the Coho smolt and moving them into our holding tanks and counting them as we do that. So these are it should be about 200 Coho smolt, so Coho salmon, and these fish here are BY 2020. So I'm trying to get 5 per net full just so I can keep track.
So all in all, we requested about 1,000 Coho salmon from the hatchery. And as you can see, once all of the salmon are placed into their temporary holding tanks from the 4 coolers that were in the back of the truck, they will be then further utilized in a research study here at the Alaska SeaLife Center.
We'll just go back through that real quick. You went and caught those, or you picked those salmon up. We didn't catch them.
Yeah, we got them from the Trail Lakes hatchery. About 1,000 Coho salmon that we got from them. It was cool. They came out with little netfuls, and they had to weigh them, kind of like on a scale that maybe you would find at a grocery store. They got about 2 kilograms, and it was about 200 or 250 fish in each of the little netfuls, roughly.
So I wanted to ask about that then, because you mentioned that like they averaged the weight, because they were just taking scoops, weighing that, and they knew roughly how many they weighed. But then later when Chuck got here with them, he was like being careful to scoop 5. So they don't really know how many they got until he counts them?
Yeah,
okay.
They don't really know. So I think we were like just shy of 1,000, which was totally okay. I think that 1,000 was the ballpark and the goal, but it's totally fine that it was a little bit shy of that.
But we have more than 1,000 here now.
We do. We have 3,000 salmon roughly here at the SeaLife Center. Perfect. So They are, whether they're part of our collection animals here, so you would be able to see them if you were to visit here at the SeaLife Center, or even behind me here. These are tiny Coho salmon, also part of our rehab program. So with harbor seals, when they are getting ready to be released, they have to go through a process where they're basically getting checked off to see if they can catch live fish. Well, how do we feed them live fish? These salmon.
Right.
So they are able to go through this list, and if they're able to catch the fish, then they are ready to go back out.
What's that called? What's that
Fish
called?
school.
Fish school. We love
Fish
that it's
school.
called fish school. And we do have many graduates of fish school. Of
We
course,
do.
any releasable animals have to be able to provide for themselves out there.
Absolutely.
So, the live fish. Now, with these fish, of course, we were just picking up Coho, but you saw some other fish, other salmon while you were there. So Alaska does have 5 types of salmon. People love to come and catch them. And for anyone at home, you're like, I don't know all 5, or maybe you know all 5, but you don't know this one yet. There's a fun little mnemonic device you can use for this. So it's with your hand, and it's kind of like a weird rhyming / features mnemonic device. So we'll start with our thumb, right? What rhymes with thumb? Chum. And so that is for the chum salmon.
I didn't even know this.
I know. Before we start the program, Taylor knows all of the salmon. We went through the 5. She's like, how do you remember? It's like, whoa, we're going to do this. So thumb rhymes with chum for chum salmon, which is also the dog salmon, because humans' best chum would be a dog. And then you've got your pointer finger. Now, if you were going to punch someone or poke someone in the eye, if you're going to sock them in the eye, you might use your pointer finger. And after you did that, their eye's going to turn real bright red. So the sockeye salmon, also the red salmon. Now, the tallest of your fingers on your hand is going to be your middle finger. It kind of rules over the rest like a king. So that is your king salmon. It's also Chinook salmon. I don't have a good way to remember that off my fingers. Then you've got your ring finger, and you might have like a silver ring, a silver band on that finger, depending. And so that is your silver salmon, or Coho salmon, which you went and collected. And then finally, the last one, pinky, pink salmon, or you can kind of be fancy. You got a little curve. Maybe if you're drinking tea, you can curve it a little bit. And so that is the humpy salmon as well. So there you go.
How did I never heard that before? That's genius.
I'm going to have you hold the boot up. Yeah, there we go.
I do have my salmon extra tufts on today.
So
they actually have there's even humpy on here.
Yeah, you got a couple different types on there.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, what we're going to do is I want to encourage anyone that has any questions about our salmon, feel free to type those on in the chat, or you can always text us. We put that text number down in the description while we're live. It looks like someone noted that camera issue we had earlier. But what we're going to do is we're going to see what it takes to take care of these fish here. Now, we're not going to look at the fish in the back. You saw them get put into those kind of holding tanks, and largely they're taken care of by feeding into those tanks. But we are actually out at the Salmon Exhibit. So this is a hallway just past the touch tank, and you will see in just a moment how it is we take care of these tanks. Because it goes from everything from tiny little newly born salmon, roughly, they're pretty young, all the way up to, I think we've got some now that are about 4 years old, but they can get older than that. So we're going to jump on in that, and if you have any questions during this, feel free to text those to us or leave them in the chat. Here we go.
My name is Kim. I'm an aquarium intern here at the SeaLife Center, and today I'm going to be feeding the salmon, so we'll be starting with the youngest. These salmon are about a year old, and they will be getting Pacifica krill today. So I just sprinkle a little bit on top, let them get it all, and then try not to put in so much that it ever gets to the bottom of the tank. They're always really excited to eat. Not everybody's always excited to eat every day, but these guys always are. And that's probably good for them for right now. And these guys are getting the same type of food, but they'll just get a lot more of it. These are Coho salmon. They're about 2 years old. about 3 years old. And we're gonna get a larger species of krill called superba krill. So this is the schooling tank. The fish in this tank are a little bit of a mixed batch, about 3 to 4 years old. They get larger pieces of food generally and represent the salmon that you'd see out in the ocean.
All right, so that was kind of a look at how we have to feed these animals here. And as I mentioned, you know, like you can only see the one real tank behind us. I guess you can kind of see our estuary tank back there. So we do have several tanks, and that kind of belies the life cycle of salmon. Obviously, salmon born in fresh water, right? And so behind us, as I mentioned, we've got the tiny little freshwater tank back there. I'm not sure. You can kind of just barely see them. In fact, I might be able to zoom in here. Let's see if I can. Oh. So you can see some little eggs down there. And so they would hatch out. Now, Taylor, are those real eggs down there?
They're not. That's a secret.
They're not real eggs, no. But we've got you know, some salmon, so they'll hatch out of the eggs. They'll live in freshwater for a while, and they'll live mostly off of macroinvertebrates, which maybe we can do a program about that someday. I've done one in the past. But macroinvertebrates are invertebrates that are, you know, when I hear macro and macroinvertebrates, I kind of think like microscope, but they're macroscope, so they're not quite micro. You can actually see these with your eye is the important thing about macroinvertebrates. And so that's going to be little larval insects. Mayflies are a big one. Also things, worms, leeches, like midge larvae. And so that's what they're living on in these creeks. So the health of our creeks and our streams and our rivers, really important for these young salmon. And even before that, those eggs are really susceptible. So one of the problems we have here is shoreline erosion, and then you get silt that comes off that erosion. And if it settles on top of the eggs, they can just not hatch. But they don't stay in the fresh water forever. They eventually move downstream. And so that second tank that you saw Kim feed there, that's still fresh water, but it's more moving fresh water. The salmon are getting a little bigger. So they go from an egg, they go to a form called an alvin, and then they also become a fry, right? Small fry, if you think about that. But eventually they get little par lines on them, which are these little lines down the side. They work their way down to the mouth of these rivers, where it empties out into the ocean. So we do have that. That's actually that tank right back there. That starts mixing seawater into the fresh water. So we have little freshwater tank, big freshwater tank, and then a seawater mixed tank. And that is what triggers a process in these fish called smoltification. They'll actually undergo this process. So if we hold off on giving them that salt water, we can actually delay that process, which is why, you know, we've got some that are like 2 going on 3, and then we've got some that are 3 right there. And so we can kind of impact that a little bit. Because the salt water kicks off their body goes, oh, it's time, and that's when they really start growing, because the next tank is the schooling tank. That's that sort of open ocean tank where they will grow to their full size. And then in the wild, they do return back upriver at the end of their life. They go back into fresh water, their body kind of goes, it's time, and that fresh water triggers another transformation. That's sort of when they get the big humps and they change bright colors, they get the hooked jaws and that sort of thing. Now here at the SeaLife Center, we don't have a way for them to go back down the tanks, and if we let them kind of go in, they might maybe munch on or interfere with our other salmon in ways we wouldn't like. So here we just have them go one way, and they just live out in the open ocean to the end of their days. But I did want to ask you another question about going to get all those salmon.
Absolutely.
So with the oxygen, right? They put that in there, Was that cylinder, was that just oxygen that they were pumping down into
Yeah.
the, all right, so we just had coolers with
It was coolers with
so-
oxygen. Yeah,
Excellent.
just oxygen. Yeah, and then they had the air stones, which they, like you saw Chuck and Kim, it's a little tube that they were able to put into the top of the cooler. There's a hole in the top of the cooler, or the one that was, really easy. That was, you could also like check on the salmon with it too. And then in with that air stone, it's kind of heavy-ish, and it bubbled, essentially. It was providing oxygen to these fish. I thought it was crazy that as they were flying, I was driving behind them, so as they were flying down the highway, they have this big old cord coming, they're making sure that the DO and that dissolved oxygen was good for these salmon. Thought it was too fun.
Now we have a couple questions here. It looks like got
Yeah.
texted in.
Ooh.
One we have: how much do the salmon eat? Now I don't have an amount.
I
I
don't
do
think I do
know
either.
in that video with Kim, which actually I'll pull that back up. We'll just kind of have that roll in as we're going. But with these salmon, they are getting fed every day. These are one of the tanks that aquariums feeds every day. Some of our tanks, like things like the touch tank, they don't get fed every day because a lot of those animals are scavengers. They don't need a lot. But salmon, I mean, they are fit animals. And so they are going to be eating every single day. But the small fish, the little egg tank, they actually get fed twice a day. This tank here that you could see Kim going on back to, this tank gets fed twice a day. All the other salmon, just once a day. I'm not sure exactly how much, like in grams, for example.
Yeah, I wish I knew.
And we'll feed them this krill. We have the tiny krill here. Then there's a larger krill. They'll also get fed, especially like the larger salmon will get fed bits of chopped fish and squid. And we've had pellets for them as well, which the pellets tend to be kind of ground up macroinvertebrates typically. So we have more questions here, it looks like. How did you choose coho salmon versus any other salmon have at the SeaLife Center? And do all 5 types live in Alaskan waters or only some of them? So the 5 that we went over, those all live here in Alaskan waters. But as for why we selected coho specifically, I think that's just what the hatchery had for
Yeah,
us.
I think that was what the agreement was. We just have coho salmon. All of these salmon along here are coho.
And we have had other types in the past. And then we actually have other fish in some of these tanks. So in the freshwater tank, we've had some other freshwater fish I'm blanking on right now. But in the estuary tank, we've got like some starry flounder in there. And there's
We have a Dungeness crab.
The Dungeness crab.
We have a
is in there.
California sea cucumber. We have a couple of those, actually. And I think there's a sculpin of some.
I think there's a little sculpin.
I think there's a sculpin of some sort in there.
But they kind of get mixed in. But right now, all we have are the coho salmon. As far as salmon go, but as I said, we have had others in the past. Oh, another question here.
Ooh, look at all these questions.
I know, we're getting them texted in.
Thank you,
let me check
guys.
our chat real quick.
This is fun.
What is the, you can answer this. This was said a little earlier. What's the estimated total number of salmon you have at the SeaLife Center?
We have about 3,000 salmon, whether they are part of our collection out here behind us for a research project or also for our rehab program. Yeah, about 3,000 of them, which is a lot. And some of them they're in various places around the SeaLife Center. Also downstairs, they're in those big salmon holding tanks.
The big holding tanks.
Yeah, they had about 500-ish in each because it was 2 coolers. 2 coolers of fish went into one of those large holding tanks.
Yeah. So it looks like maybe that's it for our questions here now. But I'm going to give a little time there, see if any percolate out while we kind of wrap up our program here.
I have something.
Well, what do you got?
Well, no, I was just going to say that one of my favorite things to see at the SeaLife Center is actually when aquariums feeds the salmon. They're so active at the top, like Kim was saying, that these fish are actually really, really, really excited to eat. So it's one of my favorite things because they eat and they are like kind of jumping out of the water and splashing everybody. They're splashing Kim, they were splashing me. It's very fun.
That's why we wanted to show this clip, because it is one of the most active feedings here at the center. Let's see, we got them here. The little ones run around, but then even the bigger ones really do kind of chase after the food, even though, it's mostly just thawed out krill. They'll really go for it, and it is fascinating to watch. So if you ever visit us here at the SeaLife Center, I do encourage anyone coming to check that out. Ooh, we just had a question pop in. Do the salmon ever spawn here in our care? So as far as I'm aware, it does not happen, and that's because we do not introduce them back into fresh water. And that fresh water in the wild, as they're coming back in, they hit that fresh water, their body goes, it is time, and it starts to shut down. If you've ever fished for salmon kind of further upriver, upstream here in Alaska, or elsewhere, if you're even just a little ways up the stream, some of those salmon start looking pretty bad as they're coming up, and it's because their body starts to shut down to begin the breeding process, the spawning process. They have to use all their energy to get upriver, and then they create a ton of eggs. And so, we don't introduce them to that fresh water. I don't believe their body even really begins that process. We do get some of the characteristics you'd see on mature salmon. We get a little bit of like a hook jaw and that sort of thing, but they don't really begin the spawning process. That was a fantastic question.
That's a great question. Thank you.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap this on up. And as always, we want to thank our sponsor, as Royal Caribbean Group this year, making it possible for us to bring you these virtual visits in person, live over the internet. It's really fun to just do these live and get questions. You never quite know what's going to happen. If we got little camera issues here and there, we love chatting with folks. We love people asking questions. And if you still have any questions, maybe you weren't able to attend live, maybe we just are missing your question right now, feel free to type those in the comments once the video is published. You can, of course, text us at that number, but we only run that while we're live. Or you can email us questions at AskTuffy, and that's ASKTUFFY at alaskasealife.org, and we'll be happy to track down those answers for you. So until next time, right, we're going to be here next Wednesday at 11 Alaska time doing another virtual visit. But we want to thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you later.